I think so. Specifically, um, what was the one with stationed at the Owl? Is that the advisor?
Exactly.
Anybody know that part? The Owl was a time-honored emblem of knowledge and wisdom. Being older than the rest of you, I am asked to advise you from time to time as need arises. I hope that my advice will always be based on true knowledge and ripen your wisdom. Wow.
Very, very, very fitting with Mr. Duckett. We debated on making everybody stand up and do the FFA creed. Because trust me, Danny can tell you about how many times we had to practice that.
I believe in the future of farming with a faith born not of words but of deeds, and achievements won by the present and past generations of agriculturalists, and the promise of better days to better ways, and the struggles we now have, something like that. I wrote for that. Does that take us back a little bit? Wow.
We thought that it would be fitting. I was sitting in the recliner last night, and I texted Danny. I said, "Hey man, if you got your FFA jacket, if you can get to it, bring it." Y'all, this was my first year jacket. Notice that the emblem is as big as the whole back. I did get another one later on, but I thought it was funny. Still got this, and it's killing me. Danny's going to have to help me get out of it.
So yeah, we're not going to keep wearing these long, but we're thankful to have been able to spend so many years at FFA and with Ronnie Duckett investing life, investing in all of our lives throughout all of that. You about ready to come out of these jackets?
I think it'll be about time, and since you just mentioned that about Mr. Duckett investing in our lives, Rhonda asked us Monday morning if Danny and I would MC this, and so we got together on the phone later that night, and I told Danny when I was on the phone that he and I could live to be 100 years old, and Ronnie Duckett will still be finding ways to rope us into doing something that's uncomfortable. And now he's got a co-conspirator in Rhonda.
Rhonda told me there was one thing different than she and her dad though. And I said, "What's that?" She says, "I will accept no for an answer." Ronnie Duckett pushed us all out of our comfort zones in a whole lot of ways. I think that many of you here. I think Houston's going to share a few thoughts here just in a second, but you ready?
I can breathe again.
All right, go ahead.
The other thing that we talked about Monday night is when I think back, when you're 14 years old, because that's when, Mr. Duckett, and that's a whole other story in itself, because he spoke at my dad's memorial service a few years back, and he, at some point during that, I think I was 37 then, he asked me, he said, "How old are you?" And I said 37, and he said, "Don't you think it's about time you start calling me Ronnie?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Duckett." But he was always, when I really first started being around him that much was summer of my 8th grade year. I was 14 years old. When you're 14 years old, everybody in authority above you, you have a little bit of fear for them. He was only 25. And I stopped and remember that Ronnie was only 11 years older than me, and we were, you get kind of scared of that authority or whatever, but it quickly evolved into respect. And you didn't want to disappoint Mr. Duckett. And speaking of scaring the fire out of you, Mr. Fletcher's here tonight. And what I always loved about Mr. Fletcher, I always felt a little bit safe, even though you could just tell by his look sometimes on his face that maybe you didn't want to approach him at that time. But he was a redhead and so was I, so I thought maybe I had a little bit of an in there. But that was that same kind of fear when you first meet, turn it into respect. And there's not too many of y'all ag teachers and students can laugh at that because some of y'all are still scared of Mr. Fletcher.
So yes, Houston Taylor and Danny Fields, we didn't really introduce ourselves when we started off, but both of our lives have been very heavily impacted by Mr. Duckett. About a month ago or so, I had the opportunity to visit Mr. Duckett, and he started talking about someday I'm not going to be here anymore, and he said, here's some things I want y'all to do. And he started giving me instructions and orders about how this night was going to lay out. And I didn't get a lot of it. I just got kind of the top side of it. I know some of the rest of you, Brian, you're shaking your head, and some of the others have got bits and pieces of that. But here's what I heard from him, and here's what Rhonda has shared with us as well. It's like, we want to have fun together tonight. We want to tell some stories, and we want to interact with each other. Just as Houston said, this is Ronnie Duckett's one more effort of just pulling people together and connecting people. He's connected me with so many people over the years, and here he is doing it again. You want to tell them about kind of how we're going to go forward?
We may pop off one or two more things up here, but then we've got a list of some people we know that talk with Rhonda that have stories they want to tell. And so we're going to get the mic around to those people, then eventually we'll just open it up for everyone to be able to do that. And we were hoping to have two mics to where we could both work the room, but we'll make it work with one. Having just one mic is just another thing that would have happened if we were putting on a banquet with Mr. Duckett or whatever. You just adapt and go forward with it. So
I want to suggest that we do this, for the sake of time, if we all took 5 minutes, well, we'd be here till tomorrow morning probably. But on the flip side of it, we want to give everybody a chance to talk that wants to. What we have is a list of people that Rhonda has given us, some of which she's talked to already and some that we've talked to that says, I know are ready to say a word.
You can still say no, though. Like, I'm not, if you are like, I didn't know I was on the list, it's okay to say no. Dad'll take care of you later.
So some of you may know that you're on the list and some of you may not. But here's what I think we should do just to keep the thing flowing so we're not wasting time going back and forth. We're going to stage 1 or 2 or 3 ahead. And if you don't mind, the second one in line, be over here waiting so that we can hand the mic off and just keep it flowing. Can y'all help us do that? And we'll do that. So starting off, Megan Slocum, where are you at? There you are. Come on up. She's got a long drive here just a little bit. We're going to let her kick things off. And DeLon Fields, my brother, you're going to be right behind her. So you be on cue, and we'll cue up there some others in a moment.
Thank you so much. I've heard these guys refer to him as Mr. Duckett. We called him the Duckett because he was the mayor of Mena, is what we called him. I met the Duckett working in Wicks and working in Mena, and he was such a great mentor. He was very good at letting you know what you were voluntold to do. He was also really helpful about helping us clean up things. And we were behind Holly Harshman one day. Rhonda came up to me at the beginning of this and said, you're going to tell a story. And I was like, some of these stories, the Duckett would not want to be shared. But I think that this is one that the local fire department already knows about. So it should be legal to share. But we were in the back of Holly Harshman. We had a lot of old tires. And he said, Megan, what we're going to do is we're going to go back there and I'm going to take care of it. But I need you to meet me after dark in the back of behind the playground and we're going to take care of it. And I said, well, what are we going to do? And he said, just don't ask, just show up. I'll see you at 7 o'clock when it's dark. And I was like, okay, yes, sir. And at the time, Dr. Diane Gathright was the superintendent of schools, and I was a baby principal. And so I told my husband, I've got to go back up to school. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I'm meeting the Duckett on the back of the playground at 7 o'clock for something. I don't know what we're doing. And he was like, okay. So I go up there and I see a truck parked, and it's Gene Hawk's truck, if anybody remembers Gene Hawk. And I see the Duckett's truck, and I'm like, well, what are we about to do? And he said, you remember those tires that you always wrote about? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, we are about to burn them down. And we had a bonfire, and I don't know if you've ever lit rubber. It is really hard to hide, even if it's 7 o'clock at night. And so that was one of my first introductions to him, and he remained a lifelong friend for the time that he was with us, and he still feels like he's with us because there is nobody who would have loved this experience more than the Ducketts. So condolences to the family, and also congratulations to him because he's in the place where we're all trying to get. So thank you.
Russell, you're on deck.
My name's DeLon Fields. Houston and I were in the same class together, so we graduated in '82, and so we have share a lot of the same stories and memories of Mr. Duckett, but I thought I might share something that kind of happened a little bit after graduation. But obviously we know Mr. Duckett was the ultimate encourager, right? He was, no matter how old we were, whether it was 14 years old, 20 years old, or even 40 years old, anytime that we had a conversation with Mr. Duckett, it was always the same. He was always, looking to encourage us and just, reach out and ask us how things were going. Let me tell you one little story about after, many of you know that after graduation, I got married early to my wife, Cherie, and we moved to Texas and have been there ever since. And so we have spent, we've been run back and forth obviously throughout the years, but it's been living there ever since. And I guess it was early to mid 90s. I got a phone call from Mr. Duckett, and we lived in Katy, outside of West Houston at the time. And he was coming into town and was going to a car wash convention or a car wash type of situation where he was, Mr. Duckett in the car washes, right? And he was always looking for the next technology, the next latest, greatest, and he would travel all over Arkansas and even down to Texas to look at car washes and that sort of thing. So I got a call from him one day, and he said he was going to be in town and wanted to know if we could spend some time together. And I said, absolutely. So, in Mr. Duckett fashion, I thought we were going to, we met up and spent the whole afternoon driving around all over West Houston looking at car washes and stuff. And that's kind of what I thought we were doing, just driving around visiting, talking about car washes. But what Mr. Duckett was really doing, since we hadn't visited in a while, was just catching up and finding out where I was at in life and where I was at with my family and how things were going and what are you doing now? What are your hopes and dreams? And just the Mr. Duckett that we knew from. It didn't matter whether it was something we were doing with FFA or after high school or whatever. I just like I said, I thought we were just driving around looking at car washes, but he had a whole nother mission in mind by the end of the day, and it brought me back to a thought. We've all heard that old song by Trace Adkins. It says, she thinks we were just fishing. So it didn't matter that, I thought we were just looking at car washes. And that's the way Mr. Duckett has been consistently throughout, no matter how old we got. And so I thought that was just amazing. I did want to share one other real quick quote that I wrote down that I remember that I'm sure that most of y'all have heard many times. Let me make sure I don't mess this up.
Yes.
Where was it at about school? Mr. Duckett said, don't let the classroom get in the way of your education. You remember that? How many times was that said whenever he was planning an event, whether it was an FFA deal or going out helping somebody on a farm? And so that I think I kind of took that to heart, and after leaving high school, never really stepped in another classroom. But so that's something that he was very passionate about.
Thanks, DeLon. Russell, real quick, I'm sorry. It would have been easier for us to ad-lib if we'd had two mics, and I'm going to do it because this story involves DeLon. DeLon was the first friend that I ever had. I never had to ask my mom or Miss Fields or either one of our dads when they were still alive, if they planned this or not, but I think they did. Somehow they got Delon and I together when we were probably about 5 years old before we were getting ready to start first grade, and I think that was so that we would have a friend when we started school. Because I can remember going over to the fields before we were ever in school. We did meet before. So I've known Danny since he was 3 or 4. And I know, and my younger sister graduated with Danny, and Delon and I graduated together. So I'm sure that we caused Danny and Sherry heck growing up, since we were the older ones. I'm sure at some point we were wanting them to not be around and stuff. But anyway, real quick, one story involving Delon. Mr. Duckett decided I needed to get into the hog business. So I did, trust me, in a big way. By the time I graduated, I had a 16-sow operation, had over 100 head and all of that. But anyway, the very first summer that we were going to get my first boar, he took Delon and I and Melinda Christensen, another classmate who was also getting a hog, and we went up to Gravett in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Now, we left Hatfield at 4 in the morning, which is usually when my dad was going to work because he ran bread route, so it was dark as could be. We didn't get too far out of Acre, boom, had a blowout on the truck, had to change that tire. We wound up getting on up in the North Arkansas, got lost on some road, a rural road where there wasn't that many houses, but we came to this house that had a long driveway, and they had these huge brick square pillars on each side of the driveway. One of those pillars had been cracked in two. The top was just sitting on the bottom half. Of course, Delon and I were in the back of the truck giving him backing directions, and I don't know if we gave the wrong direction or if he hit the gas instead of the brake when we said stop, but he hit that pillar, the top of it fell over. So then we're out there trying to lift that thing up and set it back up on before we're seen and getting out of there, and eventually we do. When we had the flat tire that morning, I forgot to mention, we threw that flat tire in the back of the truck. And of course we had crates that we were going to put the hogs in the back of the truck. So we get all the hogs back, running from Gravett to Tahlequah and everything, and we stopped at this little old hamburger joint right when it was getting dark to finally get something to eat. We went inside, and he said, I'm going outside to call Avetta. So he did. While he was out there, because it took a while on the phone, and we didn't know what was going on, but when he came back in, because it was so dark, by the time he got off the phone, he looked over there in the back of the truck and saw my hog out of the crate. And after all that good money that I had just spent on my first Poland China boar, so Mr. Duckett is going sneaking up on the truck and everything and jumps on that hog to grab it, and it was that flat tire. There you go.
Shana McCarthy, you are next in line. There you go.
So I'm going to kind of follow up with a little bit of Mr. Fields and part of his driving stories over there. I was in Portsmouth, Arkansas several years ago, and I was in construction, and they were tearing down a car wash. Well, Mr. Duckett built the first car wash here in front of Walmart, and around the late 90s, let's go with that, about my senior year in school. I worked for him down there, and I thought, being stuff that Mr. Duckett taught me, there's probably some good valuable parts in this thing that, as a guy with a car wash, would probably use. Well, anyway, I tried to call him, and I could never get him. And I kind of made arrangements with the guy that was tearing it down. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to reach this guy that needs these parts and stuff and everything. Anyway, long story short, the next morning I go by there, and I'm like, hey, I can't get a hold of the guy, but if you can set these by, store them, whatever, I'm sure this guy would want them. Well, as I pull in there, and I'm like, man, that truck looks familiar. Frankie and Mr. Duckett were already there. I don't know how, but anyway, they done it to it. But anyway, so that was that part of it. Just, he was always figuring stuff out way before he even knew it was fixing to happen or about to come about. We're going to the driving aspect of it, and this is a kind of I don't know if it's a joke, I kind of mentioned it to a couple of them earlier, but knowing Mr. Duckett, I think there's a lot of truth behind this. I spent a lot of time with him whenever I was in school in the little red S10 truck, the white Dodge truck. I mean, it was always, we were going somewhere. And a lot of times it was just him and I. Mr. Duckett, you want to turn that turn signal off? After driving for 10 miles down the road. And there's a lot of you that's been with him would remember that. It never went off. He just always left it on. Well, anyway, he told me this story that he was coming out of Hot Springs one night, and it was dark and everything, and he just got the white truck running. And anyway, he was coming out of Hot Springs, and he gets pulled over. And if you've been around him, you probably thought that he was, as myself as an officer, I'm like, I got me a drunk. Well, of course not. He wasn't drunk. Anyway, the officer said, "Sir, the reason I stopped you is you left your bright lights on. You didn't dim them for me. So some of you younger generations are not going to get this. The older crowd's going to get it really well." Well, anyway, he goes, "Well, son, I just bought this truck and I'm trying to figure out all this technology on it." He goes, "I'm just no poor country boy that, I'm not used to some of this stuff." And that truck was very basic. I mean, to me. And I'll get back to that. That was one thing Mr. Duckett always taught us, was moral value of things like that. It didn't matter what kind of vehicle you drove. It's just you got there and you got there how you got there. Anyway, back to it. And he goes, "Well, son, I got this truck. I don't know how to dim the lights." He goes, "I've been leaving since I left Hot Springs." He goes, "I about got a hole board in the floorboard over here from trying to find that dark dimmer switch." Well, anyway, the young man's like, no, sir. He goes, "The dimmer switch is probably going to be up here on your steering column." Well, anyway, he goes, "Son, I'm kind of a bigger guy." He goes, "I don't know how I'm going to get my foot up there and turn that thing off." So that was kind of, and knowing him, I could see a lot of truth behind him actually telling that officer that deal. But anyway, I got involved in FFA in about the 8th, 9th grade. Mr. Collins really kind of pushed me in there and took me under his wing and got to meet Mr. Duckett. And, my father, before he passed, was a big cattle rancher and all that kind of stuff and everything. Well, as my mother, we went on and we kind of got out of all of it. So here I am, 9th grade, and I'm like, I don't really know much about cows. I don't really know much about sows, but I learned something. FFA is a lot more than cows, plows, and sows. And that right there, that guy taught me, bear with me, all right, taught me a lot more than just cows, plows, and sows. He gave me an opportunity to meet so many different people out there, and the opportunity to go different places. Miss Sherry, Youngblood. I'm sorry.
I think she left.
She may have left already. But anyway, we were talking about a trip that we got to go to Washington, D.C. on, and just different things like that. I mean, I'm just an old country boy from Vanderbilt, Arkansas, that had not been out of pretty much Mena. And then here I am, standing in downtown Washington, D.C., standing in downtown Kansas City. And it was because of that guy. This is the reason why I was there. He seen something in me. Still trying to figure out what it was, but he tried to influence me. I may be running over on my time, and I apologize. So fast forward, I graduate. I was the chapter president for a year or so, enjoyed it. And if you ever went to Mr. Duckett's banquet back in the day, that was us. That was he gave us a sheet at the beginning of the year, and he goes, "This is the conference that we've got to go through." And it was up to us to make it happen. Now, granted, behind the scenes, he made sure it happened. But anyway, I'm in college out here at Rich Mountain, and he calls me up one day and he goes, "You know, Russell, I think you'd be a good ag teacher." I'm like, "No, sir, not me." He goes, "No, you need to be an ag teacher." I was like, "Mr. Duckett, school's not my deal. I'm not a..." He goes, "No," he goes, "You got the personality, you've got it." So I was like, okay. So I'm out here, I think it was maybe my first or second year out here. Anyway, he gives me an opportunity, and he goes, "I want you to come out to the school." And I went out to the school, and kind of shadowed and did a little bit of stuff. And that was back, I guess student teaching may have been around forever, but it was kind of something that I didn't have a lot of experience with, and I was nowhere near a student teacher. But I learned a lot of valuable lessons during that time, and I realized that I did not want to pursue that, becoming an ag teacher. That being said, the ag teachers that are here, I know a few of them from my past experiences. Mr. Fletcher's name I came across, and I know there's many of others. Your men and women of the agriculture teaching, the influences that y'all have brought upon the students. They've become doctors and lawyers and law enforcement and electricians and everything that you can imagine walking in this world. There's a lot of you that had a lot of influence on it. And the earlier, whenever they opened up, they had a, excuse me, I'm sorry. They kind of stole my deal on, hear about the owl. The owl is a time-honored emblem of knowledge and wisdom. And that was Mr. Duckett. 100%. The knowledge that gentleman furnished for everybody. And we'll still be using for many years to come. And I'll leave you with one thing that he always left me with. Keep on, keep it on.
Brian Everson, you're right behind Shane.
That's no surprise. She was president when I was there.
Oh my goodness. I didn't know I was going to be doing this till this evening, so I'll keep it together. And if they could say, ask me who man that impacted my life the most, it would be Mr. Duckett. He brought the shy girl out of the deep woods of Big Fork, and if you were from around here, you know what I'm talking about. We lived way back in the woods, and he took me to my first FFA leadership contest in the big town of Fayetteville. You know, that was big to me back then. And then he showed me how big the world can be. And Ben, Brian and I were one of his first students when he first came to Mina. I was the only girl in the program. And some stories about that I remember. Being the only girl, I was kind of the one that was always the clean one. And you know, ag teachers, their offices are always clean, right? Well, I'd come in and I'd clean Mr. Duckett's office, and he'd come in and he goes, "What did you do?" And I said, "I cleaned your office." He said, "No." He said, "You know, organization is not necessarily neatness. It's whether you know where it's at or not. Am I right?" And then one thing about him, he always told me, always make sure I have enough yellow sticky pads. And I asked him, I said, "Why?" He said, "Because that's how I make my list." And so he'd write something down. He said, "Go put that in my truck." And I'd go out there, and he said, "Put it on my steering wheel." I went out there, and his whole steering wheel was covered in yellow sticky pads. So that's how I learned how to make my list. But one story, when I was in school, I had a really bad car wreck. And I totaled my little truck that I bought with my first land's money that I'd showed that year. And then I was driving an old 78 Halloween orange step-side Dodge. Ugly as sin. The bumper was a 6-inch piece of pipe. And I remember going to have to go to college in that. That was the old farm truck. And right before I went to college, he put a light to steering wheel, keep it on. And that's why I still have that sticky note to today. Sorry, y'all. But he was the most influential guy in my life that got me out of the woods and into this big bad world. And I sure appreciate him and owe him a lot. Thank you.
Believe it or not, that same old orange truck moved me to Fayetteville because Ronnie called Shane and said, "You know, Brian's going to college up there, but I don't know if he's got a rig to get there." And made arrangements for her to pick me up at board camp because that's pretty big for Fayetteville. That first year of college, my parents never made it up there, and I hitchhiked back and forth many times, but luckily I had a lot of friends. I tell people that Ronnie Duckett, my ag teacher, is probably the reason I'm a pharmacist today. He said, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. I said, well, he took us to the colleges and introduced us to places, and the people he introduced me to at Fayetteville were the ones that cared about me when I wanted to quit and come home and be a farm boy. They were the ones that looked out for me and got me a job, and I worked for a couple of professors, and it was all people that Ronnie had introduced me to. Some of y'all might know that Ronnie D. Duckett stands for Dwight, but in my book, it stands for difference maker. In my daily life, I see people, I try to make them laugh or smile or hold the door for them or hope they have a little better day because I was in it. And Ronnie, he kind of took it a step further. If he was in your life, he wanted your life to be better. He sure made a big difference in mine. The world may never know how much Ronnie Duckett changed it, but he sure changed my world.
Lee Smith, I forgot to call you all ago when I did Mike. Go ahead and come up. Mike Collins, you are on deck. Mr. Duckett always said to officers, there's nothing wrong with failure because that means you're trying.
That's right.
Yeah, I've known Ronnie for a long time. He didn't remember, but the first time we met was when I was in high school. And he and Larry Larimore were really good friends. Larry Larimore was my ag teacher. And he inspired me to go into the profession. But I met Mr. Duckett, and I was remarking to Megan earlier, Ronnie and Larry would haul the high school kids from Foreman to Nina to other places. Not many schools do that, but you know, that ag program got us to mingle and mix with students from other, and I met Shanna back in high school during one of those trips, so you know, it's really good, the networking that ag or FFA created for me, but then the networking that Ronnie did. But anyway, he didn't remember me when I became a student teacher, and we would always come up here to Robbins Ranch and work out livestock judging teams. And so at the time I was student teacher with Bill Dyer, and so Bill joined, and we came up here. I was a little bit behind the crowd. I don't know, I was taking care of some business with students or whatever. And Mr. Duckett and Mr. Larimore and Mr. Dyer were all in a group together up there working, probably telling jokes. I don't know. Anyway, so I started approaching the group, you know, feeling like one of them. And Ronnie turns around and said, "You kids need to stay back there in the back." And Mr. Dyer said, "No, he's my student teacher." Okay. Anyway, but you know, Ronnie throughout my career, all the way up to what I'm doing now, he's always been both an ear and a voice of wisdom and reason, and I love him and really appreciate all that he did for me. Thank you.
What is your job now, in case people don't know?
Oh, I'm superintendent here in Nina.
Yeah.
Mr. Fletcher, you are on deck, wherever you went. There you go, you're next.
Ronnie, you put me on the list. Anyway, no, I've known Ronnie about 3 different ways as a great friend and a teaching partner. And also, Ronnie got into administration when he transitioned out of his ag teaching here at Mina. So I've known Ronnie a long time. Awesome guy, straight shooter. I mean, what you see is what you get. And he really lived life on his own terms, and I've always admired that in a big way. But you know, when you think about a straight shooter, you know, you think about somebody getting from point A to point B pretty quick. And y'all know Ronnie well enough to know that getting from point A to point B, sometimes he hit his target. But dadgummit, sometimes you went over here, went there, but he always ended up accomplishing what he wanted to accomplish. But looking back on it, it wasn't about the destination, it was the ride you took to get there. And that's what I learned from him. Okay, I think I got it now. Anyway, that ride was incredible. Got a funny story though. Well, I didn't think it was funny at the time. I never thought Ronnie would be my boss in relation to school administration, but he was our transportation director, and he was kind of the bus boss at our school. We had to always, get buses ready to go on FFA judging trips, those kind of things like that. And so anyway, so during the spring, I know Brian, all the ag teachers there know how busy spring is, and just, you're going, you're just surviving some days, how busy it is FFA-wise. Well, I was hauling a group of kids from Fayetteville back to Mena, and got a speeding ticket on the bus. And anyway, I thought, well, how am I going to break this to Ronnie? And it was in a minibus. Those don't have governors, by the way. And the patrolman told me, he goes, I wouldn't give you a ticket, but you're actually gaining speed going up the hill. Anyway, so I took it, got the ticket, and I called Ronnie, and I say, hey, I got a ticket on the school bus. Well, he paused for a minute. He goes, I've never dealt with that before. So I thought, okay, we're going to see where this goes. Well, anyway, I need to visit Dr. Gathright that will talk to me the next day. Well, I did, and apparently I was the first school bus driver to get a ticket. That's hard to believe. I mean, but that's what he said. So he suspended me for 3 months, right in the middle of the judging season, where I couldn't drive a bus. And looking back on that, Lee, man, that was nice. That was super nice. Oh, man, I might have got a few more tickets. But anyway, y'all know Ronnie. Awesome guy, always had your best interest in mind, and you can't ask for any more than that.
Coach Martin, you're up after Mr. Fletcher.
Well, I could sit here and tell you more stories. You want to know in a long time. But I tell you what, you're talking about an FFA banquet. This is his final FFA banquet. He planned banquets. He planned this one. I talked to Rhonda earlier about FFA banquet. The only thing's missing right here, right now, though, Rhonda, we don't have a collection plate to pass around to raise funds for something. Either for FFA chapter, SAU, foundation, whatever. Because he always wanted to raise those funds. I supervised Ronnie. I got to know when he started teaching in 1975. I went in down there, Frankie and Jerry Sheen was superintendent, Hatfield. The program was dead, if y'all know what I mean. It wasn't doing anything. And we're talking about it, the building, Mr. Sheen said, we're going to close this down if he don't do something. Ronnie and I sat down, and he said, equipment, it was bad, so remember that compared to what it should have been used to. You know what they were equivalent? I said, Ronnie, he said, wait a minute. I said, well, Ronnie, this program, they've dug a grave out yonder. And they're fixing to shove everything off in that grave and cover it up, But you can't keep it out if you want to. He said, you think I can? I said, I know you can. Just get her done. And he did. He got her done. He and I talked many times, and all the years I supervised him, always had some good fun, laughing with him. And, all you FFA members who are here, stand up a minute. FFA, if you're in FFA anytime, stand up. One of his things was, why are we here to go with everybody? Why are we here to practice brotherhood? Pick up. Do you remember? Practice brotherhood, honor opportunities and responsibilities, and develop those qualities of leadership, which every FFA member should possess. You be seated. He believed in that right to the end. And he talked about that, to provide leadership. And I sit over here listening to all these stories, and I could tell many more. But it makes my heart, as an old man, probably one of the oldest ones here, and seeing you, some of you were youngins back then, Houston, and the Fields, and some others who come around and talk about his life, because I knew what kind of life he lived. And one thing I do know this, because I talked to him several times while he was in the hospital. He told me one time, me and him talking, he said, Mr. Fletcher, don't worry about me. I know where I'm going. I prepared a home up in the glory land. I'm going, and when he went there, St. Peter met him at the gates. He said, welcome home, thy good and faithful servant. So you need to remember Ronnie Duckett. I've got memories, I can tell more, but I'll quit.
Billy Lee, you're gonna be on deck here. One moment, I have to, you're good, stay right here. Mr. Fletcher, you said something about passing the plate, passing the bucket.
Yeah.
Well, he kinda did.
Did he?
Yeah, this is in you can find all this information, but, here's what he told us. Rather than giving flowers, he asked for to invest in the places that was dear to his heart. And some that he had started. Mina Schools, there's a Ronnie and Mitzi Duckett outdoor classroom. That's one place. The Arkansas FFA Foundation, and then also the SAU Foundation.
Which
So-
the SAU scholarship is in his name. That's something we started. It's something he did for, I don't even know how many people he's done
You're
this
right.
for. But,
He wanted it started in his name. That's what we're starting it for.
yes.
We're gonna get it funded.
I
Frankie, he didn't give up. You're the leader now.
I'm the pit bull.
You're the pit bull. And Frankie will go be calling you and say, I need to. That's what Ronnie did.
Yep.
He'd call you out by name and say, I need some, for whatever the cause was. And we're gonna get it done.
Thank you, you set me up for that.
Hello, my name is Lyndall Martin, and most of y'all that have spoke tonight have been people that knew Ronnie in his career, and I knew him throughout his career, but I knew him also as a young little boy in the 4th grade. That's where I first met Ronnie when we moved to Wicks. And, I think one of the greatest testimonies that I've ever heard is family told me, and Ronnie told me, he'd give me updates about how long he'd been, in hospitals and rehab and nursing home and so on. But Ronnie lived for 205 days after he experienced cardiac arrest. And out of those 205 days, there were only 5 days that no one came to visit him. If that's not a testimony of what a great man Ronnie is, I don't know what is. Ronnie was my longest lifelong friend. We spent so much time together. We probably spend more time than a lot of families' brothers spend together. I know I spent more time with Ronnie than I did some of my brothers. And Ronnie was always there for me. Believe it or not, Ronnie and I both were real shy whenever we were in high school. And because of that, we double dated some. Ronnie set me up. I've got to tell this one story. I hope I don't talk too long, but Ronnie set me up, and I saw this girl before. I'm not going to say who it was, but anyway, we went and picked her up, and she lived in Polk County, I'll say that. But anyway, we pulled up, and Ronnie was driving. He picked up his girlfriend first, and we pulled up in the front yard and there was about 10 hound dogs in this front yard, and they were jumping up, barking, just going crazy. And they had a picket fence about 4 foot high, and the girl's dad was sitting in a swing on the front porch, and he said, and I said, and I'm scared to death of dogs, but I said, just hit the horn, Ronnie. I'm not gonna get attacked by these dogs out here. And he said, no, you gotta go on in there. And I was shaking like a leaf and opened the gate, and them dogs was jumping all over me, and one of them just latched on to the back of my thigh, hobbling, trying to get away from that dog. And I didn't look quite so fat back then, but anyway, I hurdled that picket fence and jumped over. That's a true story. And I said, I'm not going down. But she came on out, and anyway, I'll move on. Ronnie and I always worked together. Parents would have got arrested we started catching chickens, Ronnie and I, when we were in the 7th grade. And, you know, they'd arrest your parents for child abuse if they stayed out till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Some of y'all in here, I know Don Youngblood caught chickens, and I know there's several more in here that have. But anyway, that was our first job. And every job I guess we ever did, we always did together. And I call it graduating. We graduated after catching chickens. In the 9th grade, we started working on cleanup at the chicken plant. And anyway, we spent so much time together. We hauled hay together. We had a short period of time that we worked in the woods. Ronnie was an entrepreneur from a young man, and he bought 40 acres when he was still in high school. And his dad, Jim Ed, said, y'all need to go out there and cut some timber, you could make some money. And we were all about that. So here we went, and we took Ronnie's truck, and we had some posts in the back we were gonna put the pulpwood on top of. And we cranked on that saw for about a half a day. We decided we wouldn't cut out for the timber work, so we went back to the house and decided we'd go back to work the chicken plant. And then we graduated again to maintenance at the chicken plant. And J.C. Broach, some of y'all may know him, but he was our boss, and he was a great boss. In maintenance, you have to do some dirty work. At that time, it was cleaning out gutters at the rendering plant with feathers and maggots and stuff. I'm sorry, y'all just got through eating. Anyway, that's what we did. And then, whenever we got in college, I guess me and Ronnie did a really good job. We worked on the old Walmart building, constructing it. Ronnie and I were the mud men. We mixed the mud for the old Walmart building across from the super center. And it's been there standing for over 50 years, so I guess the mud's all right. But Ronnie and I always worked together. We got another great education there from Ronnie's dad. Some of the guys, the old men that worked there, they were in their 40s and 50s. Me and Ronnie were in college. There was 2 other young men. Mike Fortner was one of the block layers from Cove, and his dad, Owen, was working. Frank Miles worked there. Earl Hooker owned the Walker Construction Company. But we got a pretty good education from those old guys. They kind of make, Kenneth Gillum also worked with us. Well, he was on the payroll. Anyway, I'm sorry about that. But Ronnie and I were always together, and Ronnie was a great friend whenever we went to college. I went to college at Magnolia because Ronnie did. He was an ag major, and I was a wannabe basketball player. I wasn't good enough to play on scholarship, so anyway, I went there because Ronnie went there. And Ronnie told me one time, he said, you know, Lingo, you're the only jock that ever spent any time in Dog Hall. Some of you ag guys know where Dog Hall is, but anyway, I spent a couple weeks in Dog Hall. And I hung out with all the ag guys in Dog Hall and Child's Hall because I felt more comfortable with them. To me, it was a big city at Magnolia. I went to school at Gillum. Don Stemple was my ag teacher and was blessed to have him. Ronnie and I used to go to Razorback football games together, and Ronnie had a tremendous influence on so many people. He loved people, and he loved to try to see people do good. He always said, do good. And Ronnie did that till the day that he left the earth. There's a song that comes to mind. I've always been influenced by music. George Strait sang a song entitled Here for a Good Time. And Ronnie, I think he fits this mold a whole lot. This line says, I ain't here for a long time, I'm here for a good time. And I'm not talking about being a wild partier. Ronnie was not. But he lived every day the way that he wanted to, and he had so much influence and positive on so many people. And I was one of them that he had a lot of influence on me. I'm so thankful to call him friend. When I visited Ronnie the past few months, he was always so positive. Every time you'd see him, there would be nurses come in or people bringing the meals or whatever. They'd say, how you doing today, Ronnie? He'd say, great, how are you doing? Just had a smile on his face. And every time on the way down there, it's about a 100-mile trip for me to Ashdown anyway. And I always kind of dreaded in a way going, but every time I came out, I felt a lot better. Ronnie just had that magic about him that could make you feel better for being in his presence. He was a great human being. I've always felt like who we choose to allow to influence our thinking, beginning with Jesus Christ, and then whoever else, your family members, your co-workers, your friends, and so forth. But we all make choices about who we're going to allow to influence our thinking. And Ronnie certainly had a great influence on my thinking. And he helped me in so many ways, and I know he helped so many of you. There was a man walked on this earth over 2,000 years ago that loved people, and he had a positive influence on so many people. Ronnie was the same way. He loved people, and he had such a positive influence on so many people, as we can see with this crowd here tonight. And I know quite a few of you, there's a lot of great people in this room that Ronnie had a great influence on. And I remember when I was still that 4th grade little boy, the way that his family made me feel. His mom and his dad, I spent the night in their house, and Frankie and Rhonda, Kay and Cindy. It's a great family, and they had a great example to follow in Jim Ed and Gladys. And we can all look to Ronnie and see what a great man he was. Mr. Fletcher stole my line. Ronnie said, keep on keeping on. We're going to keep on keeping on, Ronnie. We're going to miss you.
Thank you, Coach. I'm going to ad-lib real quick, Billy. And I know that Coach Martin, Mr. Duckett, would want me to thank you for never letting me and Hatfield beat Wicks. Frankie and I go back a long way, and I was thinking about that the other day when I was down at the hospice on Saturday, and after Bowser came down and picked Mr. Duckett's transported the body back. And Frankie gave me a big old hug. The last time I could remember getting a big hug like that from Frankie was the last time they beat us. At Wicks. If y'all know Frankie, you know that nice sense of humor he's got. And I get it, and I understand it, because I've been around it a lot. And so when we were sitting down in the hospice room, and I sat with Frankie until Bowser was down there, and I just kept thinking, I looked back at Ronnie every once in a while, and I just kept waiting for him to lean up and say, "Gotcha," and lay back down. Go.
I'm Billy Lee, for those who don't know me. I'm kind of like what Coach Martin said, but on the different end of it. I never knew Mr. Duckett as an ag teacher. I was in second grade when he moved from Hatfield to Mena, and so I had a different type of relationship with him. Rhonda and I, y'all may not know, but we're brother and sister. We were born less than a day apart in the same hospital over here in Hill and Mena, and I think we've kind of been together ever since. Mr. Duckett had been my parents' teacher in school, and my mom used to talk about he was still doing college work, and she'd type all his papers for him because he didn't know how to type and he hated doing it, so she'd type because she hated watching him hunt and peck on the typewriter. But yeah, Mr. Duckett has always been a father figure to me. It's been in my life. Ron and I were, I was an only child, still am an only child, I guess I should say. But Rhonda, we were brother and sister all through school for, I don't know, just that's how we acted, you know. Sometimes we got along, sometimes we didn't, but we always cared about each other. And sometimes we were mad at each other, but then we'd be like, all right, here's what we're going to do, okay, you understand? And it was just how it was. And we started having birthday parties together when we were teenagers. Our 13th birthday party was our first commingled, co-ed party. And boys and girls together, and all was exciting, and we had no idea what we were doing. But Mr. Duckett comes out and announces he's going to feed the cows, and all the boys leave. And I'm like, oh, hey, we're trying to have a party here. Where are y'all going? They didn't care. They wanted to go with Mr. Duckett to feed the cows, and they were gone for 45 minutes or an hour, and that's how it was. But that's who he was. You know, all boys just want to be around him, learn something from him, see what he was going to do next, see what he would say next. Sometimes that was the best part. And so, just growing up around him, and like they said, he was somebody that you didn't want to disappoint. And you know, I've been thinking about it, and I'm 46 this year, and I was talking to a minute ago about how that shouldn't be possible yet. I mean, we should still be 14, 15 years old having birthday parties together, but there are people in your lives, and if you think about it, you all have them that you just feel better knowing they're there. You may not see them for a year. You may not talk to them for 6 months. Just knowing they're alive and they're in the world is a comfort. And I'm getting to the age now where those fellas are passing away. And there's been a few of them in the past decade that I've lost. It's amazing. One of those guys that a lot of y'all may know is Larry Strickland as well. And the two of them together was some of the most hilarious stuff I've ever seen in my life. I'm on Martin Title now, and Mr. Duckett was in my office one day and trying to figure out some land deal he was doing. It was always, can I do this? And sometimes it's like, we could, but we shouldn't, you know. And he's like, okay, well, what should we do? And well, okay. One day he's at my desk and we're hashing through something, and he gets a phone call. And he says, oh my gosh, gets up, I gotta go. Larry Strickland just dropped the kid off on the side of a county road somewhere because he wouldn't behave and drove off and left him. And I was like, I didn't doubt it. I'm like, yeah, that sounds absolutely correct. But talk about, you know, Chicago's talking about getting a speeding ticket and never had to deal with that before. That was no one of those situations. He was like, it's Larry. You know, that's when he came back to the office the next day. He's like, that's Larry. I'm like, it's Larry, yeah. And I talked to Larry about it the other day, or not the other day, but a few days later, he's like, "Not do it again, you know, I'll leave them there, what are they gonna do?" So, one story, and y'all may have heard him tell this, he's told it to me 3 or 4 times, it always made me laugh, but, you know, car wash tokens. You have to forgive me, I can't stand still, so. But he'd always give out car wash tokens. And he joked about Mitzi. When he met Mitzi, he said he'd given out some, you know, met a lot of 1 car wash token girls. He even met some 2 car wash token girls. But Mitzi was the first 3 car wash token girl he ever met, because he gave her 3. And I always thought, you know, like I said, he told that story, I always thought about that. Like I said, sometimes he'd ask me, "Can we do this?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, but we shouldn't." He came in the office one day with 12 car wash tokens, gave them to me and said, "I need you to do me a favor." And I was like, should we? What you're about to ask. Turned out it was one of the easiest things I ever did for him. It took me about 5 minutes to get it done, and he was amazed. And I was amazing because I made the computer produce a document, you know, it's that sort of thing. But, you know, we are going to keep on keeping on, but this is one of those, my great friend Jeffrey Richardson posted that, you know, the term pillar of the community or giant of a man is often overused. And this is one of those circumstances where it's very appropriate, but it almost feels inadequate. It doesn't quite get the point across to what Mr. Duckett was. And you can, this room tells it from childhood friends to everybody he influenced in FFA and through ag teacher, to me who never had him as a teacher, simply as my real good friend's dad, who was always just an influence in my life. And so he truly was and still is a giant of a man. And his legacy will live on long after we're gone. So, thank you.
I forgot to tell Shelley she was on deck, so we just texted.
Hello, I'm Shelley Whaley. I believe God brings people into your life. And Mr. Duckett was one of those for me, and a lot of other men that I see around this room, because FFA was such an important part of my life. I'm going to pick on Mr. Collins for a minute. Mr. Collins was my first 9th grade ag teacher. But Waldo seemed to kind of be that was my home chapter, seemed to be a training ground. Everybody didn't stay long. They left. Mr. Collins left me after the 9th grade, left me high and dry. I had some good ones to follow. I had Don McGee, some of y'all may know him from across the Oklahoma line, I had Stacy Stone. But there's men in this room that took care of me and looked after me, because they knew I had younger ag teachers coming through, and I've always been very, very thankful for those men in my life, and I think a lot of them know who they are. But Mr. Duckett was one of those. He, even though we were from a little bit of a distance away, he was always there. When I was at a leadership camp or things, or showing cattle or livestock, he was always there reminding me, "You can do this. I want to see you do things. I want to see you apply for things." And so that was always really important to me. And Mr. Collins mentioned full circle things that come into your life, and how I knew him in multiple different ways, and the Ducketts. This I might get emotional about. Frankie and Dawn have been so instrumental in our lives for me and my husband Leon. They've been life changing for us, just like Mr. Duckett was. And I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate the Duckett family. I don't want to talk too long, but I will say Miss Gladys gave my child her first amount of caffeine that she ever drank. Leon came up here one day, and Alex had never had caffeine before, and Leon comes back in the house, and Miss Gladys says, "Boy, she sure likes that chip and pops." And Leon's like, "I bet she does, because she's never had it before." So the Ducketts have always been just very, very, very special people to us. As of late, Mr. Duckett and my career path, I went to school at SAU, majored in ag business. I currently work as the marketing communications director there at SAU. I worked there for 26 years. They couldn't get rid of me. I say I go to college every day, it's fun. The phone calls I've had in the last few years have been hilarious. He'll call me, "We're going to do this. We're going to raise this money. We're going to do this. We're going to do this for the ag department." And yes, sir, whatever you got going on, I'm right behind you. Like, I'm supporting you 100%. And Rhonda, from SAU, we want to tell you guys how much we love Mr. Duckett and are appreciative of everything he's done for SAU. And I can't wait to be on the sidelines to watch us raise and endow the fastest scholarship we've ever raised, because under Ronnie Duckett's name, we'll do that because of the influence he's had on everybody and all of his students that have come through Southern Arkansas University. But I just want to say thank you for your dad and the influence he's had on my life and the Duckett's.
Shannon, come on up, you're up. Alan Blackwell, you are next in line.
I'm gonna follow my notes, so I stay on task here. I'm a little bit like some of the others. I didn't have Mr. Duckett as an ag teacher either, but in a way I did because my two older brothers did. So I was in, like a lot of us who grew up in ag or in FFA, you feel like you've been in FFA since you were 4 or 5. You get that. So there was influence there, but really my earliest memories of spending time with Mr. Duckett was probably when I was in high school. Even though he wasn't my ag teacher, they still lived out at Hatfield, and I did some work for him on their farm, and even took the state. He asked me to stay at their place and take care of their poultry farm as a teenager. When they were going out of town, somehow or another that worked out okay. But there's some things that I just want to say that these will all resonate with you. Characteristics. He was always trying to help people, always coordinating something. He was a master delegator, was he not? In fact, I had a nickname for him. I don't know if anybody else ever referred to this, and this is a term of endearment. Don't take it as negative. I called him Teflon because nothing stuck to him. His phone would ring. Particularly, I think about this when he was here in administration at the school, and if you remember, he had 2 phones. He had his work phone and his personal phone, and maybe Miss Linda says sometimes 3. But do what? And an office phone. So see, and he could use all 4 of them at one time. I know I saw him use 2 more than once. But he was a master delegator. The phone would ring, and he was just like a backboarder, like Teflon. It was going to slide off because he was going to delegate somebody to take care of it. It was a trait of his. And it wasn't, I'm not saying he was lazy and he didn't do things. We all know he worked hard. But he was great at getting people to do that. He was a master delegator. Some of the projects that I think about that he worked with, this one goes way back again. When I was a little bitty kid, I remember riding to town to come to the Polk County Fairgrounds because there was buildings that need to be built. I don't even remember some of the things that we did. I think we built some wash bays for pigs and different things. I say we, I was just a kid, I wasn't doing anything. But that way back, working on the fairgrounds, and I promise you, this is a short list, and I won't get a lot of them, but then one of the next ones that I think about was somehow he drugged me, and this is, I think, the first time I met you, Josh. After the tornado hit, we had to put together some temporary office buildings for some of the staff, and he got everybody in Polk County to work on that project. I don't even know what the building was for. But there was kids there dragging. Josh, you were kind of coordinating the electrical and the IT, and they had all kinds of stuff going on. And he got Kevin Randolph and the folks at Tyson to cook chicken that day, and he, again, somehow or another, I wound up helping Kevin cook chicken, and I didn't even know how to cook chicken at that time. And thankfully, we got it all done, but he was always doing things in projects. He got involved with helping to get turf on the football field. Was a lot. Anybody? Do y'all remember that? Did anybody else get that phone call? A lot of these things after the tornado, major impact in the rebuilding of the Mena High School after the tornado, coordinating, moving the middle school back to Hatfield and utilizing those facilities and breathing life back down into that, and just coordinating tons of things there after the tornado. The baseball and softball fields, there was a lot of people involved with that, but that was a project that he worked on. The animal science lab out here that we have, participated in that, and then of course the outdoor classroom that carries his and Misty's name, The SAU reunion recently, he was working on that. There's probably 100 that I don't know about, but he was always working on projects, and I see he was always helping people. One of the things early on when I was shortly out of high school, he somehow convinced me, and Tracy Standiford was a friend of mine, came over to the house. We both grew up with chicken houses back in the day when they were 1 or 2 farms, and he laid out an idea and a model where a guy could build 6 or 8 chicken houses, and of course that's the norm now, but that was 30-something years ago. And Tracy was smart enough to listen to him. I wasn't. Tracy did. I don't know that he ever had 6 or 8, but he did have poultry houses, and I think that Mr. Duckett was an influence in that. He's been successful in that. The last time I saw Mr. Duckett was September 27th. It was after his brain surgery, after the tumor. And I sat in the room that day. I happened to be in Conway when Rhonda made one of her posts, and I looked at my wife and said, I got to go see him. So less than a month ago, I thought I was going to go for a short visit. We were, 3 or 4 hours. Miss Joanne was there. We talked about that a while ago. We did a lot of listening that night. But like Danny said, he was talking about things he was going to do. He was talking about people. I remember him talking about his dad, Coach Martin. He talked about Jim Ed. He was telling me some stories about the wisdom that his dad had implanted in his life, and his mom. And I've been thinking about them tonight as I hear all the things that people are talking about and thinking the influence that Mr. Duckett had goes back to Mr. Duckett as well. But he sat there that night with the most positive attitude. The first thing he said to me, he said, "Are you on Facebook?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Did you see Rhonda's post?" I said, "Yes, sir." I knew I had to come when I was this close. He said, "I think I'm the only one that's not sad." And he wasn't. He made it very clear to me that night. He said, "I know where I'm going." He said, I think his phrase was, "I bought into that completely." And he even said to me, maybe when I was a younger man, that wasn't as obvious in my life. But he made it very clear that he knew where he was with the Lord and where he was going to spend his time. And even to the very last end. When I walked out of there that night, as I'm walking out of UAMS at 1 o'clock in the morning and facing the realization that my car is way over there on the other side of that dark parking lot and I'm in Little Rock, thinking, what was I thinking? I'm just reminded of, I thought I was going to go by for a 30-minute visit, and we were there for hours, but because he just wanted to share and he wanted to talk. I didn't know it was going to be the last time I saw him. I only got to talk to him on the phone one time since then. But he's just like, that day he was just like we all remembered him. He was positive, he was encouraging. As Danny said, he was talking about things he wanted to do, talking about business, talking about all these other things, and helping people. And so I hope that's the way that we remember him, as a master encourager, master delegator, and if you want to call him Teflon, well, that's a great nickname because it's an term of endearment.
Lisa Childs, you'll be behind Ellen.
Well, I hope I keep it together. Frankie and I were in school together at SA. I have to look at Frankie because when I was in school with him, he kept us laughing all the time. So that may be what I need to keep together up here. One thing, those of us that graduated from Hatfield and our FFA banquets, as an ag teacher, when I became, it was like I wanted to one-up him as far as having, the best. I'm not sure when he gave a list out and told people, you guys handle it. That's not the way we did it when I was in high school. he would tell you, then he'd come back and tell you again, and then he might tell you 3 or 4 more times to make sure that you get it right. And but no, his hallmark of a good banquet was you either had to have a good meal or good speakers, and tonight we've had both, so this has been one of his best banquets. A couple of stories. Another thing, I always considered him a life coach because I didn't have a dad. He was more of a brother and a fiddling dad. He was only 9 years older than me, so he was a young dad at that time. I mean, he worked my butt off. I'm not sure, when it changed from keep on to keeping on, but I used to work for him some, and he was building chicken houses when I was in school. I was up on the roof or something. Anyway, I fell off, and he saw me, and he goes, he said, "Are you all right?" And I got up, and I said, "Yeah, I think so." He said, "Well, let's keep on and get back to work," in other words. So he was definitely the guy that taught us by doing. We jumped in. I don't know if you guys remember the old blue Ford. I don't know when that thing finally died, but we jumped in the truck, and we didn't know necessarily where we were going or what we were doing, but we always had a good time doing it. If we were lucky, he might buy us a Coke once in a while, but you were going to do some work. He was just that type of teacher. I met him when I was in the 8th grade. He was not my ag teacher in 8th grade, because back then we didn't start until 9th. He was actually my health teacher. I don't think I learned anything about health at all.
That's the worst health teacher.
But I knew when I was in the 8th grade that I wanted to be an ag teacher. He was just one that you wanted to be around. And he would always tell us, whatever we were doing, if you showed livestock, he said, "Guys, we're going to have some fun. And I'm going to teach you a little bit about livestock as we do this." And of course, we learned a lot more than what we thought, but he sold us on the fun part first. And, and those of us that have been ag teachers, that's what I sold them. Is you're going to enjoy it, you're going to have some fun, and you're going to learn something along the way. And one thing that he was also good at, 5 minutes before it was time to do something, he'd come up to you and say, "Hey, Brian, I need you to open up and welcome everybody, okay?" And that's what he would do. And he did that. He did that to me, and he said, "I want you to be our prepared speaker." And I was not, I was 11th grade, I believe, I think, the first year, and I didn't even get out of sub area. I was terrible. And he said, we've got to work on this for next year, okay? And I said, "Are you sure you want me to do it next year?" And I said, you remember, they didn't even put me in the top 7, and there were only 6 speakers. So, anyway, he said, "No, we're going to keep working on it." So we kept working on it, and he asked me for some ideas, and I'd say, "Well, what about this?" And he said, "No, that's already been done. Let's think of something else." So we finally came up with a topic, very broad. And I get through the first sub-area contest, and lo and behold, I won. And there was more than one speaker there. And so we go to district, and we practiced, and he had me do a speech in front of some other teachers and things like that, and ask questions. And questions was my hard part. And so, you know, he would write out some questions, and we'd go drive around. I don't know how many times we went down the same dirt roads talking about that speech. But he knew the speech better than I did. And some nights I wanted to say, well, why don't you do this? You know? Anyway, I won the district contest, and I was a little bit surprised, but I get to state, and that was also the same year that I ran for state office. And anyway, I did not fare as well as I did at district. I didn't get in the top 1 or 2 or 3. There was only 4 speakers, so you know which one I got. And but I had a guy ask me a question. My speech was about the American farmer, and this guy asked a question about Russia, and I made a mistake, and you know, one of the things I was always a little blunt, and I said, I go, what? You know, you're not supposed to do that as a speaker. And, anyway, I said, my speech is about the American farmer, not Russia. And so, anyway, after I get done, of course, you know, I got 4th out of 4, and Mr. Duckett, as you can tell, I never, he always told me to call him Ronnie. I never could. I always called him, he was always Mr. Duckett to me, and always will be. But anyway, he came up to me and he said, well, let's talk about what we need to do next. And I said, I'm a senior. and he goes, well, that guy really should have asked that question. And he said, he really didn't listen to your speech, did he? So he had a way of building you up, even though, you know, at the moment you were kind of down. And but I called him my life coach, and I know I'm probably going along all hurry. And anyway, he always had a plan. And sometimes you know, you're like, where is he coming up with this stuff? And anyway, I ran for state office, and I didn't get elected. I was really down because I lost my speech. Didn't get elected state office. FFA was all I did for 5 years, you know, and him. And so we're walking out of the chapter. It was the chapter house at that time. And he said, next week we need to get you in college. And I'm like, no, that's, you know, I planned on going to college. And he said, well, you don't have time to be, you know, thinking about this stuff. He said, let's get you down to SAU and get you enrolled. And worst summer I ever had. July came, August came. I was ready to go home. I was ready to come back to Hatfield, Arkansas. And I don't know, one of my professors, well, it was Dr. Atterbury, called him. I didn't leave, you know, but he drove all the way down there from Hatfield, I guess the next day. And he took me, first time I think he ever bought me a meal. But anyway, he took me out to eat. And of course, by the end of the conversation, which he did all the talking, he had a knack for that. He'd say, well, let's talk. Am I wrong?
No.
He'd say, let's talk. And then I would listen. And anyway, I stayed in college. I graduated and I started teaching. And he calls me one night and says, Alan, I need you to take some classes. And I said, well, doing what and where? And he said, well, we have some classes at Hope, and we need to make a class. And I said, okay, well, I'll go down there. Didn't even know what the class was or anything. And, but whenever he called, you know, you answered. And, so I get down there, and next thing I know, well, they needed some more people the next semester. And gosh, I was already, he told me, he said, you're already 2 classes in, you might as well finish now. And so, get my master's in ag education. And then I guess some of them started taking classes in administration. And he calls again. And, you know, next thing I know, I'm taking some classes to be a principal. And then another conversation we had later on, I started taking classes to get my ed specialist. And of course, today I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't.
What is your job today? What's your job today?
I'm superintendent. And I will tell you this, I would have never thought I would have been an administrator as long as I have been, as much as I loved ag classes, ag education, FFA, and everything that it stands for. But I'm here today because of Ag Ed, FFA, and Ronnie Duckett.
Rick, you're up next.
My name is Lisa Childs. Ronnie is a cousin of mine. His daddy was first cousin to my papa, Orville Childs, who taught ag at SAU. First, I want to send a quick note from my mother, who wants to share a vivid memory she has. For some reason, I have forgotten, my mother says. I was riding in a vehicle with Ronnie. He was driving. He was carrying on a conversation with me and conversations with 2 other people on 2 different phones, and I was told that Ronnie did this all the time. Sounds like it's true from what I've heard today. Anyway, Ronnie was a cousin of mine. We probably saw each other once a year, plus funerals. We have family reunion the first Saturday before the first Sunday in June every year. And some time ago, I think maybe 15, 20 years ago, he just started plotting about how to keep this family reunion going. Because, you know, as time goes on, people die. And so and I think I've heard he's also good about plotting. He's good about thinking about what might happen next. I did not realize how good he was at plotting at this point, where I might not have joined in conversation with him. But he decided we needed to do something about this family reunion, about making it more sustainable. And there was, of course, a financial ask that we did. But he also decided we needed family history stories, and that for some reason I was who should tell them. He put me in charge of telling family history stories. One thing led to another. I now have a master's in history from the University of Arkansas. My thesis won best thesis or dissertation on the topic of Arkansas history. I'm working on a book about the history of the Ouachita Mountains for the University of Arkansas Press. I'm not sure that's exactly what he had in mind. But it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, who am I to say? Ronnie's forecasting is long and broad. And what I do know, because Rhonda has told me so twice now, that Rhonda and Kyle and Frankie and all of his siblings are really glad I took on that job so they didn't have to. And I'm going to miss Ronnie so much, and I'm so grateful to him for getting me on that path.
So thankful we didn't have to do that.
So Rick, as you're coming up, Donald Western, you're going to be next.
I don't know if he knows. Not yet.
You're up.
You know, I find it humorous that they try to put a time limit on people who were influenced by Ronnie Duckett. I mean, how do you expect us to shut up? Golly, guys, where do you start? You know, Russell and a couple others mentioned Ronnie's driving. I had a little instance that came to memory as I was sitting back there. I guess it was my junior or senior year when we won the state in livestock judging. First time Mina had ever won state livestock judging, I believe it was. And he arranged, Mike may remember, I don't remember who the professor was that he hooked us up with, I believe from Texas Tech or Texas A&M. We went across the entire state of Texas from feedlot to feedlot judging livestock. I'll never forget this because I can agree with Russell about the blinker. I put a many miles on that old, at that time, if I remember right, it was an old gray Dodge pickup years ago. Riding with Ronnie, I got picked on a lot because I had a big head, and I was a big boy, and I was always known as Ronnie's boy in school. You know, and but back to the story, real quick to get that out of the way. This professor we were with, we were traveling hundreds and hundreds of miles. We would go to 7 or 8 feedlots, and we'd judge the cattle, and then as we were traveling on the next one, we had to write our reasons out, and we were given reasons in the car as we were going down the road. We were in a Chevy Oldsmobile, something big car. And Ronnie and the professor in front, and one of our, I don't remember, it was me and Nikki Elder and Jody Duke and I think one of them drivers, I can't remember, but anyway, as we were driving, this professor, as he would talk, he would just press on the gas. And the more he talked and the more motivated and excited he got about what he was saying, the faster he would go. And Ronnie would look over at the speedometer and he'd say, hey, you need to slow down a little bit. Speed limit's 70 or 55 or whatever it was. He let out of it. Well, it got pretty ridiculous because we were sitting here trying to study our reasons and study what we'd written down to be able to talk, and we're getting car sick in the back seat doing this. Well, we found out a new tick he had. When he got really excited, he squeezed the steering wheel and honked the horn. We're talking about 400 or 500 miles of this. I'll never forget, it's the only time I ever saw Ronnie be glad to get out of the vehicle with somebody. Because he said, when we left there, when we got done, he said, you know, that's the only driver I've ever known that probably drove worse than I did. You know? But, and to pick on Mike a little bit, Collins, and his little speeding, I think he did have a speeding problem, I'm just going to say. When we would drive around weighing pigs when I was a 9th grader, he didn't waste no time. We sped everywhere we went. And along that line, I'll never forget, and as I've gotten older, I appreciate it even more. When Mike came to Mena, I guess when I was an 8th grader, where you at, Mike? Yeah, I guess I was an 8th grader when you started in Mena. You know, Ronnie took him under his wing, and, you know, Mike, he was a lot more polished than Ronnie. You know, he was a fresh, new ag teacher, and Ronnie thrived on making Mike feel like he wasn't very smart. It didn't matter what we got into from, you know, dealing with kids and discipline at school. You know, he'd say, watch this. And he'd come to me, because me and Ronnie thought a lot on the same path. He'd say, watch this and watch Collins. You know, it was always embarrassing to Mike. He was always trying to explain his way out of things. But anyway, I could go on and on, but Ronnie was, like a lot of y'all mentioned, he was more like a second dad to me. I'll never forget that first set of show pigs I bought. You know, I left the house saying we was going to get one pig, and Mike, I'll never forget, you may or may not remember, you probably don't remember this, but I remember I told my dad I was going to go get one show pig, $50. We come back with 2, and Mike was scared to death. He said, Ronnie, we told him we was getting 1. We didn't tell him we was getting 2. We showed up at the house with 2. You know, and he said, oh, don't worry about it. Well, I was very successful. And it kind of transformed my life starting then, really. From working on the farm, and I remember Rhonda, I mean, you know, I don't remember this. I remember Rhonda working cows, getting screamed at because the cow, she couldn't turn the cows in a chute and different things. But I want to say this. My daughter will graduate SAU in December. I didn't graduate from SAU. I went to SAU and I got off track. And you know when you got a parent that is pushing you and hounding you, you just like to avoid them. I had a time where I avoided Ronnie Duckett because I knew I wasn't doing what I had set out to do. I avoided Ronnie like he was a plague because I didn't want to hear it, because I knew he was going to be pushing me. You know, a year ago, it's been over a year ago now, when Becca got settled in down there at Magnolia, my daughter, and well, it was 2 years ago, I guess now. She told me, she goes, Dad, I'm working for a farm down there, and these people are some Duckett. Do you remember that name? I said, yeah. I said, Magnolia. I said, wasn't Frankie, was it? She said, I don't remember. She said, but I think that might have been it. Anyway, she called me back about 3 days. She goes, yeah, that's she's working for Hayden and his wife. And she said, that's Hayden's daddy-in-law. I said, let me tell you something. I said, you're in good hands, child. As a dad, I never had a pressure release from me worrying about my daughter being in college when I found out she was under the influence of the Duckett family. That was a security to me. But I'm going to sum it up with this, y'all. I could go on and tell story after story after story. Ronnie come to me over a year ago, and he learned of Becca being down there working for Hayden, and he took that opportunity to, as he does everybody. What's her plans? Where's she going to go? Where's she going to be teaching at? Where's she want to teach at? What's she want to do? I said, Ronnie, you just had to talk to her. He said, well, what's her phone number? And I talked to him a lot over the last couple of years because he was wanting me to go in a little business venture with him. And Ronnie had a tendency to push you to those uncomfortable places that you didn't like being. And it was only to make you better and to grow you. Brian, I heard story after story, you and Shayna, and so many, I want to go back to that real quick. When I was a freshman in high school, I remember Ronnie was just kind of getting his feet planted in the Mena School District and really getting set and building a program. Brian and his class was the beginning of that, and I was fortunate to be part of the next class that came through that had some go-getters that wanted to pursue and follow alongside Ronnie and would listen to him. He wanted to build a respect for the program. His big thing was to not be the ACT program at Mena, to be an integral, important part of the Mena School District. And he built on that. We started with a teacher appreciation banquet. We'd bring all the teachers came out at lunchtime to eat hamburgers and hot dogs, and we served them, and we sit down and talked to them. That's all part of Ronnie bringing people together. He wanted the teachers to understand ACT kids. He wanted them to understand that we weren't just about cows and plows. He had a way of doing that, but he really took it too far when I think it was my sophomore year, he said, hey, we got a lot of pigs we need to cut and get them ready to show. He said, why don't we take them up here, bring them up to school, why don't you demonstrate how to neuter a pig? Nothing like spending lunchtime out there cutting a bunch of hogs. But you'd be surprised how much interest that generated across the school, because I went to 5th period science class smelling like a pig. He pushed you to those limits. But guys, I want to sum it up with this. Ronnie never shared anything with me about the gospel or about Jesus. In my older years, I've learned that needs to be the most important thing in my life. To see that I know Jesus and all those around me know Jesus. And Ronnie, although he didn't ever speak it from his mouth, he lived it every single day. He loved people. He liked to take the kid that was a trouble kid and turn him into somebody. He liked to find the one that was the biggest jerk cause the teachers the most headaches and most problems and make them a star. Make them a star greenhand. You know, I've got dear friends that didn't jump on the bandwagon with Ronnie Duckett in high school that are very successful today in business because Ronnie touched their life, regardless if they were in our group, they still listen. But my point is, Ronnie lived out what we're supposed to do as a Christian. He loved on people. He pulled people together. And as Mr. Fletcher and a couple other ones said, he's walking on streets of gold today. And there's only one way that we can do that, is make sure our life is right with Jesus. And I want to challenge y'all, above all, Ronnie leaves a legacy, a huge legacy and a huge hole in our community. But above all, he knew Jesus. And I made sure of it a couple of months ago when I visited with him. May 20th, he called me and sent me a text, and he said, me and Hayden and several of us a text. He said, in October, I want to meet with you and your daughter. That meeting never happened. He was bound and determined to push my little girl to get her master's degree. Because he don't ever quit, guys. Because he cares and he loves about people. And I'm going to stop there, I'll keep rattling.
Jeff Miller, you're up next.
So the first thing I want to say is, Houston, you and Danny are an inspiration. I thought about putting my FFA jacket on tonight, and I went in there and looked at it, and my little brothers, both of theirs, was hanging up there beside it, and I thought I'd have to sew theirs onto mine. Thank you. Man, this guy, no, I'm not from Polk County, not from this area, but I've been very connected here for about 40 years. Annette Hayes was on the board over at Odin whenever I got hired to be an ag teacher. And one of the first things that happened after I got hired to be an ag teacher at Odin's, I got to go to a conference over in Little Rock. I had a brand new pickup truck that I'd gone to Glenwood and bought because I had a new job. It got towed just as soon as I got into Little Rock because I'd never parked in Little Rock before. Anyway, it was a rough week, and I came home, got back to school, and I walked up to the ag building, and there was a tag on the door that said, and y'all, it was a white tag. I know now that it came from surplus properties over in Little Rock, where all the ag teachers go to buy all the surplus property. And it was in scrawled chicken scratch, and it said, you need to make sure that you don't ever leave the air conditioner on whenever you leave your building. And it was signed that the Agri Council. And I promise you, I had no idea what the Agri Council was. And I sure didn't know until it was a little while later that it was Ronnie Duckett who had stopped by to say hi. He was an incredible mentor. 40 years, at least 40 years of really being a good friend. I think everything that you all have said tonight is just so true. With the exception of, he used to come to Hot Springs all the time looking at car wash spots. And he would call, he'd say, hey, can you find me a couple of places to look at? I want you to go look at a couple of places. Well, the first few times we did that, I would ride with him, and we finally got a place. I said, Ronnie, I'm going to drive. You can't do business and look at stuff and be on the phone and the craziest drivers in the world in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and you do not need to be. So I drove a lot.
Good
I
choice.
drove a lot. The last time I was up here, back in the spring, I stayed with Ronnie one night. I was working up here some, and anyway, whenever I came into town, I met him at the car wash, and he said, "Get in my truck." So we did, and we looked at Mina. He loves Mina. He loves Polk County. He loves you. I was a high school principal for quite some time, and I think every year, whenever I finished my address to graduating seniors, somehow or another I would use the line, people forget what you do and people forget what you say, but people never forget how you made them feel. That's about the best thing I can say about this guy is I'll never forget how he made me feel. He's a good friend. Gee. Okay. I love you, bud.
So Jeff, as you're coming up, Andy Curry, where you at, Andy? Andy? No? All right, I'm gonna run through a list of people here. We're about to the bottom of the list of people that we knew of, that we know of. Is Josh Hennings here? Okay, you're up as well. Kim Bass?
I don't think she's here.
No? Y'all, if I don't see you in, all right. Landon Rowe?
He's not here.
No. Reed Mendoza? Haven't seen Herschel Bell?
No.
Right, okay. David Kellogg? Kenny Miller? Okay. All right, so after you go, Jeff, here's the deal. If any of you, you can all look at your clock. We're all getting restless from recognizing. But this has been good.
Somewhere around 1987, I was up at Fayetteville running the parasitology and physiology farm at University of Arkansas. Had a kid from Hatfield who was working up there on a student worker, and his name was Robert Smedley. He lived at Hatfield. And about that time, I was getting ready to move down to Mina. And Smedley said, you need to find Ronnie Duckett. I didn't know who Ronnie Duckett was. And so, in moving to Mina, Arkansas, I was building a hog operation, and Robert told me to meet Ronnie Duckett, who had recently moved to Mina to run the ag program at Mina High School. So Robert told Ronnie to give me a call. That was the first time I ever met Ronnie. It was coming on in the summer, and we had a brand new propane grill, and about 2 or 3 days later, Ronnie called and said, I've got the steaks ready. I'll be there in just a minute. So we fired the grill up, and that's the first time that I ever saw Ronnie in the flesh. Ronnie wanted me to come to Mina and talk to his students about going to college or going to trade school or anything like that. Every time that Ronnie and I spoke together, it was only for the kids. That was his main purpose, was the kids. And you know, I would take some time off to go to Mena at Mena High School and, you know, find the kids, try to help them, and move along. Ronnie, being around Ronnie was interesting. You never knew what he was thinking. It was a lot of fun. Ronnie put me where he wanted me to be. All of a sudden, I found a friend. I don't know if you know it or not, but Ronnie is one of the most pushiest persons I've ever met. Push. Ronnie had a natural way to push people to excellence. Sometimes we didn't know we were headed toward excellence until Ronnie got a hold of them and pushed them to excellence. Ronnie called me and told me that I was on the fair board. I didn't ask. I said, okay. Same with Farm Bureau. Probably in the same week. We on the Farm Bureau board. Now, keep that in mind. I'm building a hog operation, and it's taking me like 16 hours a day to work on it. But he would never say no. So, a long time past that, I left Mena to become the Department Chair of Agriculture at Southern Arkansas University. He called me every day. For the first couple of years, he called me every day. Ronnie pushed me as hard as anybody could ever push me to recruit, to expand the recruiting districts. And all of a sudden, new people came in, new students. I don't know how many we had when we started, but when I left, it was probably twice that amount. So I retired and moved back to Mena. I don't know how Ronnie found that because I kind of sneaked back in. But he called and he said, "Hey, we need to go to the chopping block." And I said, "Gosh, Ronnie, I'm doing some stuff, and well, just meet me at the chopping block about 12:30. Here we go again. One of the fun things that we did was we climb in the vehicle and we always go to the Hall of Fame, Agricultural Hall of Fame. And you know that's a pretty good, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours to sit there, but after the party after all that was over, we just got to reconnect again. So, you know, having Ronnie in my life was very, very, very helpful. His life was a testament of hard work to push all of us to excel, and we were made better because he cared for us. Ronnie never gave up, no matter where he was. When I would go see him down at the hospital or over at Ashdown, Ronnie never said, "Why me?" Ronnie never complained. Ronnie knew where he was going. There was no doubt about that. Right now, Ronnie is with Jesus, and I know that for a fact. Now the caveat for all of this. I worked at the bank, Union Bank here for a while. And there was 2 caveats on this about Ronnie. Everybody that I saw said, "Storage buildings? You're crazy, Ronnie. You're never going to make money off of storage units." I said the same thing. About 6 months later, I had a storage unit. I think most people have storage units now. The other one, this one's the funny one. Nobody is going to use that car wash. It's too hard to get in and out. It won't work. We're not going to loan you the money to do that. How many car washes does he have now? How many? He was just a mastermind on that. And for certainly, Ronnie and I talked. We talked a lot. Talked about his condition and my condition. His phone calls when I told him that I had Alzheimer's. That's why I'm writing. Wrote everything down. I can't keep it in my head very long. But we took a vow to pray for each other every day. I'll miss my friend.
Hello, I'm Josh Ames, who's a former student of Mr. Duckett's. I've been an electrician now, I guess, for almost 30 years, because he picked me out of a crowd when I was young and got me interested in something that I didn't know I had an interest in. Very influential. And raise your hand if he ever talked you into doing something you didn't want to do. I'll kind of plagiarize myself a little bit. I spoke at Ronnie's retirement ceremony that we had here at community schools. How many years ago was that?
15.
A lot of years ago. And then I spoke at one of Ronnie Duckett's faults. They were praising him a lot that night. And I pointed out one of his faults right off the bat. I said, you never give me any instructions in public speaking. And so I'm going to prove that to you all just now with this microphone. He got me involved doing electrical work through the electricity program there in the FFA when I was a freshman. Stayed with that all through school, went to college, introduced me to Nolan Arthur, Freddie Scott, Dr. Johnson. A lot of y'all that know in the U of A know that. I ended up running their electricity program for them at the state level for the FFA and was involved in that for almost 20 years. So that helped me branch out, learn things, teach kids. Some of the things that Ronnie taught me whenever I was going in the program. I don't know that he picked out that path for me because electrician's a good trade or because something that's always going to be there. I think he picked out that path for me because he knew he was going to have storage buildings. Convenience stores. So he had far sight. Very talented in that regard. To cap off, tell you how it started. You'll notice that Ronnie and I had a similar hairdo.
Yeah.
Back when I was in school as a freshman, I had lots of hair. Had it down here, had a ponytail, had a goatee, drove a hot rod car. Wasn't your typical ag student. I did like the FFA program and the fact that I got to deal with electricity and it was something that I had an interest in. I thought, you're never going to get me into your FFA. I'm not going to wear your silly jacket. We always practiced together. My freshman year, I wasn't even ready. Never even filled out my application. Hadn't done my stuff properly to join the FFA. He handed me a permission slip one day to get signed by my parents. I said, what's this? He said, you got to sign that so you can go to district contest tomorrow. And I said, Ronnie, I can't sign that, or my parents can't sign that. I'm not in FFA. I never filled out my application, never paid my dues. And he said, yeah, you did, and you owe me $15. But he got me roped into it, and as many of you know, very influential fellow. I'll never forget the things he did for me, the things I've been able to do for other people because of
impact he had in my life. So I know he'd be happy seeing you all here tonight, as I am. Happy to be here. I was happy that Rhonda talked me into coming up here and talking to you. So maybe I won't be the last person up here to praise Ronnie tonight, but we thank you all for coming in.
So that is the last person on our list. And it is getting late. But if there's anybody else that feels like you want to share, we don't want to leave you hanging there, okay?
I'd like to close this out.
All right,
That's my
hang
job
on.
too,
You won't get trumped by
Okay,
don't.
I just want to say something.
All right.
And then Ronnie can close it. She said, I did not know any of this. I didn't want to say this.
All right, give me 2 seconds and I'm gonna give it back to you. There's been so many themes across here tonight. Everybody said the same things in different words. Push. Ron, we talked about that. He's pushed me. I'm not gonna talk a whole lot, but I took his advice, and this is I'm so grateful that I was able to do this. He told me one time as a young guy, I said, if you're ever gonna send a letter to the president, you ought to write it down on a pencil and a yellow pad, sign your name to it, handwrite it out, send it to him. I sent a note to Ronnie Duckett, Mr. Duckett, hand wrote it out not too long ago. And I was able to tell him all the things that I would have said here tonight. But y'all said them already. Mm-hmm. But I will say this. I'm not the man, I would never be the man that I am today had it not been for Ronnie Duckett investing in my life. He don't have a relationship with my kids, but he does. Because they've lived his legacy through me. And even though he heard that my oldest son was in the school system, got hired in the school system this last year, and he started giving him advice. He started telling him to stay connected and how good a place he was in, and started already investing in him as well. So y'all all said it as well, but Frankie and Rhonda, Kyle, y'all know that whatever, lots of positive things that's happened in me because of your dad, your brother.
Thank y'all. He was my best friend. And he helped a lot of y'all in the very beginning. And I want to tell you who helped him at the very end. Instead of doing this is hard. She was there more than anyone else. This was hard for me to say this. What y'all said about him is flattered. He helped in the beginning. But I just want to say thank you. Because I know what you did. Our family knows. I want everyone else here to know what she did at the end. And Ronnie said, poor Joanne. She stayed when she should have run.